Yuta was a character who needed a bit of a rework for a long bit of time. One of the common complaints from the moment IMED made him that lasted the entire process of development was that he felt like a TSB character, felt closer to what Toji would have been, or felt like a boring generic rushdown instead of the super cool puppet character he could have been. That's why I was pretty excited when the news of Yuta Rework was announced, and especially since it was designed by ZZ, who's had a pretty good track record of making good characters, with Nanami being pretty awesome, and Haruta and Kurourushi both being two of my favorite characters in the whole game. Unfortunately, this rework was rushed. Rushed as hell. You can tell the difference in how much time was given to Kurourushi over Yuta, because Kurourushi is a genuinely refreshing character who introduces new gimmicks and a different playstyle that's centered more heavily around neutral, while Yuta feels like much of the same stuff that we've already had of other characters, but on top of that, he has terrible design choices with some of his moves that make him feel inconsistent and shaky, as if every single combo is a dice roll. He has good bones in the sense that there's some nice, fun stuff, and when his playlines work properly, it can be really satisfying. But the 80% mess ruins that 20% interesting to make a rework which honestly feels miserable to play. This video is an explanation of all my problems with the Yuta rework, and why I find it so disappointing. Before we get into the video, do consider subscribing since it does help me with making content. Now, let's talk about Bumta. In terms of Archetype, Yuta's rework is a rushdown. You use second wind to initiate, Resolute Slash to gap close, and deal with blocking, Outburst to block string, whatever. His moveset fits the bill since he just gets in your face and tries to land an M1, with his other moves acting as threats to help him pressure you. There's not much to say on him besides this, because he doesn't have a super unique identity as a rushdown, unlike Kurourushi as an all-rounder, and so we'll just move on to talking about his moves. Severing Path is a combo tool. Resolute Slash is a... no, I'm just kidding, I'll actually give Severing Path some attention. Severing Path is a combo tool, and it's a decent one at that, since it ragdolls, and also sends people into the air, which is a condition to land second wind. It's bad in neutral because it doesn't cover too much ground, and it is extremely punishable on block, basically being like Curse Strikes in terms of how it functions in neutral, meaning you don't ever use it there. This move is one of the big problems of Yuta's consistency, because when you hit someone with the first slash, rather than just grabbing them and doing the whole slash barrage, it instead falls into you doing a bunch of ragdoll hitting slashes. This means a few things. 1. Your opponent can evasive during the move if they're ragdolled, which makes the move 100% punishable unless you do it off M1s instead of on ragdoll. 2. It means you can miss the follow-up slashes, since your opponent isn't actually glued to you, and their ragdoll can spaz out and cause them to not go along with the slashes. That also means that you can get punished even when they don't ragdoll cancel, simply because your slash is missed, with the opponent now being right in your face while you're stuck in your end lag. Yummy yummy, I love the taste of free M1. 3. It means that doing combos off this move is less consistent because it's not a grab. Since the move's follow-ups are just their own independent slashes, that means the opponent won't be sent up the same way each time. Sometimes you'll accidentally head surf them, sometimes you won't, and sometimes your ragdoll will take more or less time to fall down. Generally, this isn't the worst thing in the world, but with second wind specifically, which has an extremely strict timing on hitting aerial ragdolls, it makes landing that follow-up a gamble every time, because the ragdoll you have to hit isn't always the same. The move really just needs to be made a grab, and the fact that it isn't is a baffling design choice. Other than that, it's boring for the exact same reason people don't like every other combo move in the game. They're dead in neutral and do nothing outside of it. The way this was solved with Yuji was by making Curse Strike's aerial an actually viable move in neutral, and so you have a combo tool and a neutral tool on the same button, which at least makes Curse Strikes a little bit more interesting. Severing Path has none of that, which makes it boring. Resolute Slash, on the other hand, is a pretty cool move, and one of the two moves from the rework I consider to be pretty interesting. Using it makes you flash step to the cursor before doing a slash that bypasses block and ragdolls. Anytime before that slash, you can press it again to flash step to another part of your cursor and do a block bypassing black flash. This acts as Yuta's general guard break. If you react quick enough, you can M1 him out of the initial slash, but if you're holding block too much, then it's gonna get you. What's also cool is that he can mix up the timing of it and flash step behind your back in prediction of you trying to M1 him to avoid that and force you to turn around and M1 or side dash out of the way. The only downside to the move is that you don't get much value out of it, unless you move stack Rika Smash onto it to kill their knockback. It has short ragdoll and knocks back pretty far, so it's hard to follow up on it without that aforementioned combo. It's still a really nice move, and it's great in combos as well, but what's really good is that the Black Flash variant has invincibility to M1s for some weird reason, so that makes the move pretty much unpunishable. This seems to be a bug though, and when it's patched, well, it'll be more of a risky callout, but still pretty good if you're smart with the flash steps and pay attention to when your opponent wastes side dash so that they can't dodge it. It's for sure an improvement over old Resolute Slash. Outburst is the other move that I like. You do a slash that then goes into a delayed explosion, and that delayed explosion can't be interrupted. That makes the move basically a nice get off me tool, or call out, where if the opponent rushes into your face and tries M1ing you after you use a move, they'll get hit by the explosion and ragdolled, which also gives you a combo because severing path. That also makes the move really safe to use at point blank, and gives Yuta a block string. M1 into tapping Outburst forces the opponent to keep blocking, since you have the M1, the initial slash, and the delayed explosion all pressuring them, helping with M1 trades a little bit. It's also an incredible ragdoll cancel bait, because if someone does a classic evasive behind your back in M1, they will get hit by the explosion unless they block on time. And if you charge it up enough, it'll hit them even if they block, which lets you keep doing your combo and waste their evasive. The explosion also does chip damage through block, and this chip damage can kill, which has let me finish people off at times. Finally, you've got a parry on the move, where if you tap the move in a short period before an attack lands, you'll parry it. And while this is for the most part just a gimmick, it can help you with avoiding some moves that would normally be really hard to avoid, like ranged block bypasses. Parrying projectiles also knocks them back. I like Outbursts. It's a versatile move that can pressure people, or serve as a get off me tool, and it's just a decently well designed move that is one of the few good things in this rework. Second Wind, on the other hand, is a move where so many of my problems lie, mainly because of the hitbox being horrible, and it mostly just feels like a worse version of Veil Step, both in how good it is and how interesting it is as a move. The theory behind it isn't all that bad. It's a dash forward that's blockable, but it grabs people in its path and slams them down into a ragdoll, which combo starts for you. Yay! You're also able to reuse it if you miss the first part of the move. First usage is for helping you start a combo, since you have no end lag on it, and it's a nice bit of utility, kind of like Yuji's Crushing Blow feints. Then, your second usage is for combos, since it's way riskier due to having a ton of end lag on whiff or block. All sounds good, but the problem is that in combos, the move just doesn't hit consistently, and that's part of the lack of polish I mentioned before. It's so bad of an inconsistency that I've genuinely just resorted to using the first usage for neutral or for combos, and then if that doesn't work out, I find a way to safely use the second usage without getting punished, usually by knocking my opponent away and second winding the air away from them, just so I can get the first move back on cooldown. It's terrible design for a two-parter if you're intentionally wasting the second part just to get around how bad it is. Either the move should be replaced with old build step, if the files for that still exist and haven't been removed, or it needs some serious buffs to the vertical hitbox and the hitbox in general, so that it's actually consistent. It's also just kind of boring in the sense that unlike Veil Step, where you went from one really good move to a distinctly different one that was also decently good, you instead go from good move to bad version of the same move. You won't notice this problem if you're consistently winning your engagements and getting to actually land second wind in combos, but if you don't get your combo after using that first usage to pressure, and you both go back into neutral, you are stuck with a waste of a move slot just sitting there. I really hate second wind because it seems like it's intended to be a replacement for Veil Step. I mean, they're both dash moves, they're both two-parters, and they're both combo starters. Yet second wind is a downgrade in so many ways. Meanwhile, Rika was pretty much kept the same, with only two major changes. Rika's moves all share cooldowns, and Rika throw was removed. This is a huge nerf, and while it's reasonable to some degree, it's also a part of why new Yuta feels so bad to play. Instead of reworking Rika to be more interesting, or changing her moves to be actually more utility focused rather than act as combo tools, or making her act like an actual puppet instead of two moves from ABA, she just got taken out back and shot dead. It's one of the things that's irritating with the rework, because it makes one of the problems people had with Imed's Yuta, which was that Rika was just a bunch of extra moves and didn't act as something cool or unique like a puppet, even worse. She's no longer an active part of his kit that you could use very frequently to win neutral, either with Smash, Haymaker, or doing a roll-off Rika launch. Instead, she's a fifth move with variance, and that's far less interesting than it was before. If Rika didn't feel like Rika in the old Yuta moveset, Rika is barely present here. To some degree, I think that's intentional, judging from some of the balancing pulls I've seen. And it makes sense when you consider that Rika isn't very present in most of his fights, since it's only a partial manifestation. But it's just that the rest of Yuta's moveset, which is supposed to fill the gap left behind by the Rika nerfs, doesn't make up for it enough. I don't have much issue with Rika being significantly nerfed, so long as the rest of the kit is changed to make up for it, but in Yuta's current state he feels worse than before, because the other moves don't make up for enough, and his combos are much less consistent than before too. The overarching problem I have with the rework is that it didn't make Yuta that much more interesting, but simply changed some things about him in what I'd call a side grade. It's like going from a peanut butter jelly sandwich to a ham and cheese sandwich. Different flavors, sure, but it's still a sandwich cut from the same stale white bread at the end of the day. His neutral revolves around side dash M1, your one Rika move, usually Smash, though Haymaker has situational value, Resolute Slash, Outburst, and second wind's first dash, for a character that's kind of just your basic rushdown, except with less consistent combos. I remember people complained about Higuruma being boring when he was first reworked, and this honestly feels like a similar situation. You're so reliant on a select few tools to do anything, and while yeah, that's kind of the case for Hikari, Gojo, and a lot of your other M1 merchants, I'd expect a rework to make a character feel meaningfully better to play, but all Yuta feels like now is the same kind of basic rushdown he was before, only this time, his combos have a chance to spaz out and get you punished. There's another issue though, which is that they slapped the 10 less HP debuff on him for god knows what reason. I used to vibe with it back when Yuji and Megumi were actually the most overpowered characters in the game, when it was just them, and Hikari, and Gojo. But so much time has passed since then that putting HP restrictions on any character for mobility, Yuta doesn't even have that much mobility honestly, cause his isn't consistent like Higuruma or Yuji, is stupid. I don't want to mince my words here, putting less HP on characters just because they move fast makes no sense at all, when so many characters who have stronger neutrals, Ryu, Hanami, Choso, Mekamaru, you name it, don't have those kind of HP restrictions. It's an arbitrary thing nowadays that is placed on characters in the same way that people making JJS moveset suggestions just toss random damage values on the board. At this point, I'm starting to ramble off complaints on the base, because this section here was written after playing way more matches on Yuta, and just feeling how bad he is to play. He lacks the consistent options that make other characters good. Choso almost always has Supernova, Ryu almost always has Granite Blast, and hell, even in the realm of M1 merchants, who the competitive community seems to hate so much, Yuji always has access to the feints that give him rolls, which give him good mobility 24/7, while Higuruma's Gallo Throw is on a very short cooldown and lets him approach and move around really easily. Kurourushi in some ways is spoiling my opinion on Yuta, because Kurourushi was a good character with good neutral, and so it's quite the transition going to someone who's far less interesting or well-rounded. I spent most of this video talking about the base, so let's talk about the ultimate because this is also much of the exact same problems. Your ultimate still has the same gimmick of being able to switch to Rika. In your mode, your Rika moves no longer share cooldowns, but that's not actually that strong because you only have 2 Rika moves now, those being Rika Smash and Rika Slam. Rika Smash is the same as in base, and Rika Slam is the same move as before, where it grabs them and tosses them around like Hulk tossing Loki. True Love Beam was moved to the Rika moveset, and Rika now has a copy wheel where you can select a curse technique to use for copy. You get curse techniques by killing people using Rika, which makes the ult really bad for duels since you don't get the time to ramp up, but really good for public servers where you can copy multiple techniques. By the way, your copy has an individual cooldown for each move, which means you can do stuff like using Don't Move, and then switching to another move like Idle Transfiguration, and then using that again. It's good if you can ramp it up, but for casual duel purposes, you are basically locked to Curse Speech, which isn't very good. As for Yuta's normal moveset and ult, you have Elbow Rush, which is the same. Copy, which is whatever moves you selected from the copy wheel, and then a new move called Energy Ripple. Energy Ripple does a blast around you with a long startup where you're invincible, doing some OK damage for a base moveset, around 14. Pressing the move 2 times will instead do a slash that knocks them away, and then does a delayed explosion on them, also dealing some OK damage. This move's really underwhelming for an ult, all things considered. They'd be good moves in a base, maybe even OP, But like, the overall feeling of the ult is just as bad as before, because killing anybody is so reliant on doing Rika Slam into domain, and everything else is just there as fluff. If you can get copy ramped up, then yes, you have other options to deal damage, but outside of that, Yuta really does not have much in ults. Yuta's ult was honestly really bland back when it first came out, to the point that I considered making a video about how incohesive it was, but this rework certainly doesn't solve any of that. He's still the same Rika Slam into domain merchant he was way back then. Anyways, despite me listing all of these complaints, they're probably gonna get fixed, and I expect this video to be outdated sooner or later. The reason for that is that if you look in JJS's poll channel, you'll see that they have a lot of changes planned for Yuta. More variants, Severing Path being a grab, Resolute Slash being more interesting instead of Black Flash being the general default, buffs to Outbursts, and especially buffs to Second Wind and the Awakening. Most of these changes they have listed were complaints I outlined in this video, which means that there's a high likelihood that Yuta gets some much needed changes to make his rework actually enjoyable to play. And honestly, I'm looking forward to it because Yuta does have some interesting ideas, but it's just such an overall mess that it ruins the whole experience. Before that though, he's pretty rough. Anyways, that's all I've got to say for today. If you enjoyed watching, of course consider subscribing since it helps out a lot. I'm Noob Eternally, thanks for watching, and have a good day. Bye.